In this lesson, we'll learn the process for extruding polygon objects inside of Maya. So for this lesson, we're just going to start with a blank scene. Now, when it comes to working with polygons, the process of extruding is something that is going to become very, very important. It's something that you really start to use a lot. So for this lesson, I'm just going to go through a very, very quick, very simple example of how you can start to extrude polygon objects. So let's start by creating just a very, very simple shape of a book. So something that has kind of an outer cover and some inner pages to it. So for this, let's go ahead and create a primitive object. Now for the extrusion process to work, it's going to be very, very important that we use a polygon object. So we'll go to Create Polygon Primitives. And again, as I mentioned in one of our earlier lessons, these primitives will really serve as a good starting point for your geometry. So since a book is going to be pretty close to a cubic shape, we'll start with a cube. So it'll ask us to go ahead and draw out this cube on the grid. What I'm going to do is go ahead and press and hold the Shift key on my keyboard, so that way I can actually draw a cube that's going to be uniformly sized. And now when I let off my mouse, you can see our cube. So I'll go ahead and press the 5 key on my keyboard. Now let's start to come in and maybe shape this cube up to where it's a little bit closer to the shape and size of a closed book. So let's start with something like our scale tool. Let's go ahead and scale this down. So let's say that this is a book sort of laying down on its side. So there we are. Now let's go ahead and maybe scale this a little bit longer. Alright, so now we have something that is pretty close to the size and shape of a book. Now let's go ahead and take what we have here and then essentially use that to build kind of the outer cover of this. So let's go ahead and start with what we would imagine would be the outer cover. So that would probably be these 3 polygons right here. Now, instead of building these outward, what we can do is essentially start to take these inner polygons, essentially start to extrude these in to create sort of these inner parts of the page and things like that. So we'll grab these 3 faces right in here. We'll leave this one intact since that'll essentially be the spine of our book. So with these 3 faces selected, let's make sure we are currently in the polygons menu, because that is where a lot of the commands and tools that will be used for working and manipulating polygon objects are going to be found. So make sure we're in the polygons menu. And again, with these different faces selected, let's go up to Edit Mesh and Extrude. Now, whenever we apply that command, this Edit Mesh Extrude, you'll want to make absolutely certain that, again, your history is turned on, your construction history. So make sure that this option is enabled before you apply this Extrude command. Otherwise, you won't see these different manipulators that will appear. So with these manipulators, now we can start to take these faces, and essentially Maya has behind the scenes created a new set of faces that we can start to now pull out, move and manipulate to start to create our shape. So you can see that this manipulator that we get here is really sort of a combination of all 3 of these existing move, scale and rotate tools. So we can move these polygons or these faces around, we can scale them up or down, or if we go ahead and grab this outer ring, we can switch this to a rotate. We can actually begin rotating these around. Now if we want, we can go back and start to scale these down. So we'll sort of push these in. We can start to see kind of that outer layer of the book beginning to appear. Now what we want to try to do is take these polygons and begin scaling these down. You can start to see where that now becomes kind of this outermost cover of the book. Now the problem is, sometimes whenever extruding polygons, Maya doesn't necessarily extrude them properly whenever we start to manipulate and move these, because you can start to see as I begin scaling these out, you can start to see how things are kind of skewing and stretching and really distorting kind of in an improper way. So if we ever wind up in that situation, that's completely fine. Let's go ahead and just undo a few steps until we find kind of where we want to be. Sometimes you can get better results if instead of using this extrude manipulator feature, we can actually jump right back to any of our standard scale, move, and rotate tools with these different polygons selected. So if I were to come in and use my scale tool and just simply scale these in, you can see it's actually giving us a little bit more controlled extrusion result. So I can take these and actually scale these out, and you can see that in my case that's actually behaving much, much better. So what I'll go ahead and do is, again, with these faces still selected, switch to my move tool and just pull those forward a little bit. Maybe go back to my scale tool scale those back. What I'm trying to do is make sure that this little spine of the book here is pretty well sized. So now we have these polygons that have been extruded inward, or these faces that have been extruded in. Now let's go ahead and just do one more extrusion. We'll sort of pull all of these underneath. So again, with these faces still selected, let's go up to Edit Mesh, Extrude. And you can see once again that will pull up this manipulator. Again, in my case, you may wind up with situations where this manipulator is not giving us proper results, which again, that's completely fine. If that ever happens, just try switching back to one of your standard scale or rotate tools, and we can sometimes get some better results using these. There we are. Might also go ahead and check these in some of our other views and make sure everything still looks the way it should. There we go. So you can see just kind of extruding those inward, and how that starts to create just kind of a little bit of a lip in there. So now we have something that kind of appears like this outer cover of the book, and then inside we have these little inner pages as well. So you can start to see where these extrusion capabilities of Maya will start to become very, very important when it starts to become time to create your own little more complex objects. So again, keep in mind that this extrusion process will only work on polygon surfaces. Now, this has been just a very, very simple example of where extrusion can be used, and you can see that this extrude is just one of the many, many tools that we have available to be able to use inside of Maya within our polygon objects. So if you want to learn more about some of these different tools and maybe some more complex examples, you can take a look at our Introduction to Modeling in Maya course, where we'll actually cover a lot of these different tools and also start to get into some of the different modeling tools that we can begin using for NURBS surfaces as well. So that's just a very quick and simple look at using the Polygon Extrude tool inside of Maya.